Okay, hello everybody. Today we're here to interview Bernie Piper with the Federal Housing Finance Agency to discuss some things about market research. First and foremost, welcome, Bernie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Natalie. Appreciate
Thank you for attending. So just for our listeners.
Hopefully there's more than one.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in the acquisition processes in general.
Okay, so just like probably everybody else in the contracting field, being a contracting officer was not one of those childhood dreams between being a police officer, a firefighter, and a doctor. So my story, I learned about contracting back in undergraduate school. I was a double major in political science and business management, and I applied for an internship with the Department of State. And so I thought I was going to do all these great things with the department, and I get my acceptance letter back, and they say I'm going to be working in the procurement office. And I could just automatically feel this letdown when I read that. I thought, oh, I'm going to learn how to buy pencils all summer. Great. Well, my experience was a lot different than that. I actually ended up in the Office of Foreign Building Operations, and they were responsible for the design and construction of embassies and consulates all over the world. So it was pretty exciting stuff. So that definitely opened up my eyes that contracting was a lot more than just pencils. So I'm not going to bore you with this whole this is his life type story of everything I've done, but a couple of points I want to bring up about my experience that I think has been really enriching for me is one, I've worked at 5 different agencies. I've moved around between both the civilian and the defense world. So that gave you a lot of different perspectives on different missions, different things to buy, different contract types. And then the second thing is I've been really fortunate in being able to move back and forth between contract operations and contract policy, being an operational CO and being a policy analyst. And I think everybody should try that at least once, maybe not be as neurotic as I have in terms of moving around, but it definitely gives you perspective. So when you're in the role as a contracting officer, you definitely get the perspective of, yeah, I'm being told to do these different things by the policy office because I understand that they're trying to implement a new law or make some sort of corrective action of a problem in a greater universe other than just my little world. And in an operational perspective, it definitely gives you insight, or when you're working in a policy role, it gives you insight to have that operations background to stop and think through before you pull the trigger and make changes in terms of a business process to think through, yeah, I've got to change, I have to change how we do things because the law changed or I'm trying to do things better, but to think through how it impacts the actual end using contracting officer, your end user client, and the overall contractor community. So I think those are the things about my experience that I think I feel the most fortunate for.
Right, so within your five different agencies, what are some of the things that you've bought during your career?
Yeah, so once again, I think that's one of those things that I've really been fortunate that I've been able to do. So talked about my internship at the Department of State. I actually went back to state after working at DOD for a few years and worked on construction and A&E contracts, which is its own niche. Before that, back at the Navy, I touched a lot of mission type contracts in terms of both humanitarian and military operations to get goods to victims of disasters and to our troops on the ground. So that was very satisfying. And the other luxury I got from that moving around is touching almost every different contract type. So complex cost reimbursable type contracts for engineering, shipboard engineering systems. When I worked at the FDIC, I worked on these financial advisory contracts to help liquidate assets from failed banks during the heart of the banking crisis. So you could really see the impact of what was going on in the broader economy.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of you things have been very, like you said, mission oriented, and construction A&E that's very timely. So what would you say some of the best methods you've had in conducting effective market research?
Yeah. So market research in terms of technique, there's never ever a single one size fits all type solution to this. And you've got to think about your actual project. And market research applies to everything, whether it is this fancy schmancy stuff I talked about, or whether you are buying pencils. To think about what you're buying and to scale it to the appropriate level. And the other thing to keep in mind is we all do market research. And that's one of the things that sometimes I get the sour face from clients when I talk about the importance of doing market research. But I also try to communicate to my clients, well, you do already do market research. Maybe you don't call it that in your own very everyday lives. If you're any kind of smart consumer, you're going to do some kind of market research, whether you're buying a new pair of pants or you're buying a new house. Now, your level of market research and the actual techniques you use are going to vary and to be to scale to whatever you're buying. Like in that example of the new pair of pants, you're probably not going to spend as much effort as you would researching the market and figuring out what options are available to you when you buy a house. In terms of actual tangible things, the easy default answer for government type projects, GSA schedules in terms of the e-libraries, you can start learning about the marketplace, what companies are available. You can get an understanding of order of magnitude of prices, rates, skill sets that's possible. But say you don't have that luxury, it's not one of these commercial off-the-shelf type things, and you've got one of these screwball unique requirements you've never heard of. Yeah, everybody says go to the internet. And yeah, absolutely go to the internet and start tooling around. Now, in terms of tangible ideas, if you work at a larger agency, you may have a Moody's subscription. And a lot of times your client will have a favorite company. And of course, they're the only company that can do this. So if I'm relatively ignorant to the market, if I haven't really worked on within this type of industry or this field before, I'll latch onto that company. And so back to Moody's. If you pull up Moody's, or if you don't have a Moody's subscription, you can go to hoovers.com, which is also a directory of different companies. And if you plug in that company name, you'll get a very basic profile. But the little Easter egg in there is it'll list 3 of their competitors. And so you can click on that link and then you'll find 3 more competitors. And so maybe all of those companies may not be the best fit, but you have to do a little bit of sleuthing and searching around and looking at those companies' websites to see, yeah, they do offer the types of capabilities or things that my client is interested in. And you can begin to gradually generate a source list. Yahoo Finance as well. That's another one that lists their competitors, or CNBC on their website. Now, those only work for like publicly traded companies, but you can find competitors to that company as well. I found that to be a very effective technique to start building source lists.
So maybe even the hoovers.com one, it will give you for non-publicly traded?
They will give you for non-public, but they do tend to be larger companies. So that's the drawback. There are no perfect answers in any of this stuff. But for your larger companies, that is a good way to start building a source list.
Okay, that's perfect. That actually then leads into, so how much do you involve or how do you consider small businesses in your market research? So these tools you just talked about tend to be more large business focused.
Right. And, Natalie, here at FHFA, I think that is one of the things that we do fairly well in terms of promoting small business and small disadvantaged business, not only through the requirements of the Small Business Act, but we have a requirement under the Dodd-Frank to actively look for minority and women-owned businesses. So in the small business vein, which often does include minority and women-owned businesses, we set that standard of, under the Small Business Act, as we all know, if you've got 2 or more on the open market, you set it aside for small business. We raise that level even for our GSA schedules. Our default position is to start with small businesses. So we've got a mechanism in place, but in terms of how do you promote that in market research and get your client to buy off on that, that requires a little bit of education on our parts. I think it's incumbent on us as contracting professionals, whether you're a contract liaison or a contracting officer or a contract specialist, to educate the end user that small businesses actually have a lot to offer us as well. Of course, depending upon the requirement. And of course, certain requirements aren't going to be scalable for small businesses. But to talk about what small businesses can offer, especially if you don't have a very big budget, you can be a very attractive client to a small business, whereas to a large business, you may not be that important to them. And to explain that to clients, we all want to be the big fish. And you don't always, if you have a very small budget and you're dealing with a top tier large contractor, they may not be as interested in your business. If it's a small business or they're relatively new to the public space, although they may have perfectly valid experience in a commercial setting, they want to earn your respect in your business and more to the point, your good reference in the future, they're going to service you very well. Oftentimes, small businesses happen to be cheaper as well. There's some myth I think there needs to be some myth busting on that. I remember once, not so much in the vein of market research, but to tie in the importance of educating our clients that small businesses are valid, is I managed a suite of accounting service contracts at another agency, and it was a mix of large and small businesses. And one of the small businesses, she called me up, the president, she said, Bernie, I'd like to come in and talk to you. I don't think we're getting as much work as we should be getting. I was like, okay, sure, we can come in and talk about that. And I ran the report and looked at the numbers. Well, lo and behold, she was winning the lion's share of the work because she was cheaper and she brought the right talent to bear for the particular requirements that my client needed at that time. So there's sometimes this misnomer that small businesses can't compete with large businesses when in fact they very, very well can if it's for the right requirement.
Where do you see the general acquisition process going in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's really a tough one of where, we all read the paper and we don't know, or I don't guess anybody reads the paper anymore, but you read things online. I have no idea what's happening in the world from one day to the next, and it seems like almost every day is a surprise. And I've never really been good at fortune telling, but I will say one thing I guess I would like to see is the Competition and Contracting Act, for example. Now, I'm a tremendous fan of competition. By very nature, I'm a lazy person. I don't like to do unnecessary work. Competition is the easiest way to make sure you get the best goods or services that the market has to bear. My problem with the Competition and Contracting Act is that you have to publicly advertise anything over $25,000. And in 2017, $25,000 just doesn't go very far. I want a good, healthy, but efficient competition. So I wish that threshold would raise. I don't think it should be eliminated. I think starting at $150,000 though would be a good starting point in terms of anything over that to start advertising on the BizOps as a starting place. Because the side effect is we channel too many things, I think, in the GSA schedule that's maybe not the best fit. And we sort of lose that flexibility of going out to the market and leveraging it in a more efficient way because of those things. The other thing I'm sort of afraid of, I guess, in the community of contracting officers are becoming or more and more like compliance officers instead of business representatives. And it's easier and safer to make sure, oh, I checked the box, I made sure I put all the right FAR clauses in, I kept this thing on the straight and narrow, which are all good things, but if you make that your whole reason for being, you sacrifice getting the benefits of what the commercial marketplace has to offer, you sacrifice getting the very best solution for your customer because you don't have the incentive to think differently in a new way. It's easier just to check the box and follow that list of requirements. A million people would probably disagree with me, but I think this is a very exciting field. I mean, you really get to leverage so many skill sets. And if you fall into that only, I'm not saying, Bernie is not saying you don't have a compliance role and you don't have a police role in this, but that shouldn't be your only reason for being.
How do you stay up to date? Like, how did you know about Hoovers? I didn't know about Hoovers.
Yeah, and this may sound a little flip or pie in the sky, but it really does boil down to kind of like I said, I really do like the contracting field. And I think you have to have an intellectual curiosity and an interest in your profession. The first thing is talk to your client. And if your client is they enjoy their job, that's not always the case. That's not 100% of the case. But if they do, they're going to want to talk to you. And if they won't talk to you, then start talking to industry within that particular industry. And they are willing to educate you because for all those reasons that we talked about earlier, that they want to demonstrate to you that they are experts in their industry. So suck up and leverage all that free information if you can.
All right, well, great. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yep.
It's always a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
speak with you.
It was a lot of fun.
Have a great one.